The automatic glass doors at Terminal C whooshed open, and Mark stepped through first, pushing the pink stroller with one hand and gripping the handle of a small carry-on with the other. Elena walked beside him, her oversized tote bag slipping off her shoulder every few steps as she adjusted Sophie's pacifier and scanned for the nearest flight monitor. The air buzzed with energy announcements echoed overhead. Wheels clattered on tile floors, and voices blended into a steady hum of early morning travel chaos. It was their first international trip as a family. Sophie was only 10 months old, but Mark had insisted that the beach resort in Portugal was baby-friendly. Elena had been skeptical at first, worried about the flight, the time change, and everything in between. But now, with check-in behind them and security just ahead, she was finally starting to believe that this trip might go smoothly after all. The stroller glided easily through the crowded terminal. Sophie kicked her feet, giggling softly, her chubby hands gripping the plush bunny tied to the side rail. A woman in line nearby smiled warmly at the sight. "She's adorable," she said. "Thank you," Elena replied, her voice tired but kind. Mark checked the time on his phone. "We're good. Still 40 minutes before boarding. Might even have time to grab coffee." They approached the final line before security where the K9 unit waited. Elena felt a twinge of nerves, not because they had anything to hide, but simply because the presence of uniformed officers and dogs always made her uneasy. It was a primal thing. She thought, like standing too close to fire. Max, the customs dog, sat patiently at his handler's side, a large golden Labrador with alert eyes and an obedient posture. Max had worked hundreds of shifts at this airport. He was known among officers for being precise, never distracted by children or food, and always calm. As the family in front of them was cleared, Officer Daniels gave Max the signal. The dog rose and began sniffing the approaching stroller with professional focus. Elena smiled nervously. "He's friendly, right?" Officer Daniels gave a courteous nod. "Just doing his job." Then it happened without warning. Max stiffened. His ears twitched forward. In an instant, he moved not aggressively, but decisively toward Sophie's stroller. The dog's snout pushed under the blanket that had slipped slightly off the stroller's edge, and with one strong motion, Max leapt halfway into the open compartment below Sophie's seat. The crowd around them paused. "Oh hey, Mark," blurted, reaching forward instinctively. But Officer Daniels raised a firm hand. "Please step back, sir." Sophie started to cry as the stroller tilted slightly from the sudden weight. Elena reached to soothe her, her fingers trembling. All around them, heads turned, phones lowered, conversation stopped mid-sentence. A subtle wave of tension rippled across the terminal like a change in air pressure. Mark's voice was low, urgent. "Is something wrong? What's happening?" But Officer Daniels didn't answer. His focus was on Max, whose head was now deep under the stroller's fabric lining, sniffing intently. Then the dog pawed at something, nudged it once more, and a small item fell from beneath the stroller's base with a muted thunk. It rolled slightly on the floor and came to a stop near Mark's feet. Time stood still. It wasn't a toy, it wasn't a bottle, and it definitely wasn't a diaper, wrapped in what looked like plastic and baby wipes. The object instantly looked wrong. The people nearest to them took a step back. A security officer nearby spoke quietly into a radio. A red light blinked above the customs booth. Elena's heart pounded in her chest. Her voice came out in a whisper. "Mark, what is that?" He didn't answer. He couldn't. Mark stared at the small bundle on the floor, his mind racing. It looked like something from a movie, a tightly wrapped parcel with no label, no identifying marks, and just enough mystery to set alarms blaring in his imagination. His instincts told him to pick it up, but Officer Daniels was already stepping forward. "Don't touch it," the officer said firmly, eyes on the object. "Step back, both of you." Elena clutched the stroller, trying to calm Sophie, who had begun to cry. Her pacifier had fallen out during the commotion, and now her tiny face was scrunched into a panicked wail. But Elena's own panic was growing. She looked down at the object. Her thoughts jumped wildly. What could it be? Baby wipes. Something they forgot to pack. Officer Daniels spoke into his radio, his voice calm but clipped. "We've got a suspicious item. Zone 3, beneath stroller, isolating the area, requesting backup and containment within seconds." Two additional officers approached. They carried black duffel bags marked with the word K9 response and moved quickly, but without chaos. Passengers nearby were guided away from the scene, confused and whispering. One teenager started filming with his phone, but a second officer gently lowered the device with a look that said, "Not now." Mark held up both hands. Look, we don't know what that is. We didn't pack anything like that. I understand, sir. Daniels replied, though his tone wasn't accusatory. But I need you to stand over here for your safety. Just a few feet back. The new officers knelt near the item, placing it into a metal tray with a long-handled clamp. Every motion was practiced, smooth, clearly not their first suspicious package. Once the parcel was secured, one of them gave a small nod, and the tension eased slightly. Elena's voice cracked. Is it dangerous? Daniels shook his head slowly. Too early to say. Max responded strongly. Which means the scent was something he's trained to identify, like drugs, Mark asked, his voice rising. Could be, Daniels said. Or something that resembles it. Powdered substances, certain chemicals. Even something perfectly legal if packed the wrong way. We're not assuming anything right now. Elena leaned heavily on the handle of the stroller. Her knees felt weak. She looked down at Sophie, who had settled into quiet sniffles, unaware of the whirlwind around her. Elena's thoughts were spiraling. They had nothing illegal. No sharp objects, no liquids over the limit, nothing. Unless, her stomach turned. My cousin, she whispered. Mark turned to her. What, my cousin? Helped me pack the stroller last night. He brought over diapers, wipes, even formula. He said he'd already sealed some of the baby supplies to save room. Mark blinked. Do you think? I don't know, Elena said, voice trembling. But he was in a rush. I didn't double-check everything. I just trusted him. Daniels was listening. He nodded. We'll ask you both some questions shortly. For now, we just need to make sure this is handled properly. Meanwhile, Max had returned to Daniel's side, tail wagging lightly, posture relaxed. His job was done. He'd detected something unexpected, something strong enough to stop an entire security line in its tracks. He sat obediently and looked up at Daniels, awaiting the next command. Across the terminal, whispers grew louder. Travelers speculated quietly, pointing. A baby, a stroller, a package. The combination sparked imaginations. Some assumed the worst. Others were simply curious. Elena turned away from the onlookers, her cheeks flushed with shame even though she knew she had nothing to be ashamed of. Mark rubbed his forehead, exhaling a shaky breath. This isn't happening, he muttered. This is unreal. And yet, it was. A calm morning, a family trip, and a dog doing exactly what he was trained to do had turned an ordinary airport checkpoint into something that looked, at least for now, like the beginning of a serious investigation. The item sat there innocent looking, yet charged with unspoken threat. Wrapped in baby wipes and snug layers of plastic, it could have been anything, but in the context of an airport, especially beneath a baby stroller, it was a lightning rod. For alarm, the terminal had quieted in an unnatural way. Conversations trailed off. The beeping of rolling luggage scanners and distant intercom announcements felt muffled beneath a layer of anxious silence. Travelers slowed their steps as they passed the scene, heads turning, eyes narrowing with curiosity. The baby's earlier cries had faded into whimpers, but the tension in the air only grew sharper. Mark and Elena stood to the side now, guarded but not restrained. Elena's arms encircled Sophie like a shield, while Mark kept darting glances at the item that had just moments ago been hidden under his daughter's stroller. His mind was working in frantic loops. What if it's serious? What if it's illegal? What if this turns into something much, much worse? Officer Daniels watched his team work with precision. The small parcel had been isolated in a containment tray, now placed on a portable testing platform, essentially a foldable field lab, used for quick substance identification. An officer wearing gloves carefully unwrapped one layer of baby wipe, exposing a tighter, vacuum-sealed plastic pouch beneath. Mark stepped forward instinctively. Can you at least tell us what it looks like inside? Daniels shook his head. We're just trying to determine if it's safe right now. That's the priority. Behind them, a toddler nearby pointed toward the scene. Why's that doggy sniffing the baby's stroller? Mommy. The mother gently pulled her son away, whispering something that sounded like, let's not stare. Elena lowered her voice, speaking only to Mark. I'm going to kill David. Mark blinked. David? Your cousin. He packed that thing. He said he was helping. Probably thought he was being clever, using wipes and all. Who packs formula like that? Her voice cracked. He didn't say a word about it. What if it isn't formula? Mark didn't respond. He didn't want to say what he was thinking. What if it was something worse? What if they were suddenly suspects in something they had nothing to do with? Back at the testing table, one of the officers examined the sample using a handheld scanner. A small screen blinked as the machine analyzed trace particles. The moment felt endless. Finally, Officer Daniel's radio crackled to life. A pause. Then a short reply. He listened carefully, his face unreadable. Mark watched every small twitch of the officer's expression, trying to guess the verdict before hearing it aloud. Daniels finally turned toward them. "It's non-toxic," he said. "No illegal substances detected. The package contains powdered milk substitute baby formula." Elena let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Her knees nearly buckled, and she sank onto the bench nearby, still clutching Sophie. Tears welled in her eyes, not just from relief, but from the sheer emotional whiplash of the last 15 minutes. Mark gave a single, exhausted laugh. "You're telling me the customs dog nearly blew up our vacation over baby formula?" Officer Daniels didn't smile, but his tone softened. "It's not unusual. Dogs like Max are trained to detect certain chemical markers. Powdered formula can have compounds that closely resemble the scent profiles used in training materials, especially if it's been packed the way this was, tightly sealed, multiple layers, and hidden under a baby seat." Elena shook her head. "So it was a mistake, a misunderstanding, a responsible one," Daniel said. "Max did his job, so did we, and fortunately, you're cleared." Behind them, the crowd began to relax. People moved on, attention drifting elsewhere. A few even looked disappointed there wasn't more drama. The officers began packing up their equipment. Max, content, sniffed the air and wagged his tail once before lying down. The panic was over, but the consequences weren't, not yet. Although Officer Daniels had confirmed the contents were harmless, the tension hadn't vanished completely. The package might have turned out to be baby formula, but the way it had been packed and hidden still raised questions. Mark and Elena were relieved but not released. "We're going to need to ask you both a few more questions," Daniel said, his voice polite but firm. Elena blinked, still sitting on the bench with Sophie in her arms. "But it's just formula. You said we were cleared." Daniels nodded. "Cleared of illegal possession. Yes, but we still need to understand why it was packed that way. Anything concealed beneath a baby seat, especially in a sealed package, is cause for a full report. It's standard protocol." Mark sighed. "So what? We're being detained. Just held for questioning." Daniels replied. "You're not under arrest. You'll be in a private area, away from the public. It's a formality, but we have to follow through." Two additional officers appeared, this time not in tactical gear but standard customs uniforms. One of them, Officer Rivera, spoke gently. "If you'd like, we can help carry your things. You can bring the baby. This shouldn't take long if we can clear up the details." Mark looked at Elena, who nodded slowly. "Let's just get it over with." They were led down a side corridor, away from the terminal's noise and activity, into a neutral-looking interview room. There were no bars, no bright lights, just a table, 3 chairs, and a nearby coffee machine humming in the corner. Sophie dozed against Elena's chest, worn out from the earlier chaos. Officer Rivera sat across from them. He opened a folder and offered a small, courteous smile. "I know this must be stressful. Let's go over a few things. You said a relative helped pack the stroller." "Yes," Elena said. "My cousin, David. He dropped off some baby supplies last night. I told him I was short on time and he offered to help us pack. I didn't think twice." "Did you see him place this specific item under the stroller?" She hesitated. "No. I was dealing with Sophie. She was fussy. I assumed everything he brought was normal. Diapers, wipes, extra bottles. I didn't unwrap anything." Rivera jotted a note. "Was David aware you were flying internationally?" "Yes. He even asked for our flight time and offered to drive us. But we'd already booked a cab." Mark leaned forward. "Look, I get the concern, but he wasn't trying to smuggle anything. It's just the overpacked baby formula. Maybe he sealed it weirdly. But that's all." Officer Rivera didn't disagree, but his next question caught them both off guard. "Has your cousin ever traveled internationally?" Elena frowned. "I don't think so." "Why?" Rivera explained. "Sometimes people who are unfamiliar with airport restrictions overdo things. They might think they're being helpful by sealing things tight, unaware that certain packaging looks suspicious under X-ray." Mark nodded slowly. "That sounds like him." Officer Rivera relaxed slightly. "We'll be contacting him to confirm. Just routine follow-up." Elena looked down at Sophie, now fully asleep. Her tiny hand curled around Elena's hoodie string. "I just want to get to our gate. Can we still fly?" Rivera stood and closed the folder. "You're not banned or blocked. Once the final report is logged in the system, which I'm doing now, you'll be free to go. Your flight doesn't board for another 20 minutes. I'll call ahead and let security know you're cleared." A moment of quiet passed. "Thanks," Mark said, voice flat but sincere. "Really?" As they stood to leave, Daniels appeared again in the doorway. Max was beside him, leash in hand. The dog gave a short bark when he saw the stroller, tail wagging happily. Elena managed a tired smile. "You're just doing your job." Hud Daniels nodded, "and doing it well." They exited the room not as suspects, but as passengers travel weary, emotionally drained, and with a story no one would believe until they told it. Just as Mark and Elena stepped back into the terminal, an airport staff member greeted them with a friendly wave. "You're all set. Security's been notified. You're cleared for boarding gate 47. Straight ahead." Mark gave a weary nod, still processing everything. Elena adjusted Sophie in her arms, while Mark pushed the now infamous stroller, which felt heavier than it had just an hour ago. The crowd had shifted. The incident, once the center of whispers, was already fading into terminal noise and forgotten conversations. "But not for them." As they walked, Mark muttered, "I'm never trusting David to pack anything again." Elena gave a weak laugh. "Honestly, after today, I might not trust anyone again." But just as they approached the gate, a uniformed officer appeared once more, this time a tall woman in plain clothes, flashing a badge as she approached with measured steps. "Mark Bennett, Elena Torres." They stopped instantly. Mark's face tensed. "Yes? I'm Special Agent Harper, DHS." She spoke calmly, but her voice held authority like steel under velvet. "I know you've already been cleared for your flight, and I won't hold you up long. But something came up when we ran your cousin's name. David Velasquez, right?" Elena blinked. "Yes." Agent Harper flipped open a small tablet and showed them a screen. "There's no active warrant, but he's appeared on 2 prior incident reports, both involving questionable packages sent through international mail." Elena's mouth fell open. "What kind of packages?" Harper's eyes narrowed. "One was seized in customs last year. It tested negative for narcotics, but was sealed similar plastic wrap, diaper bags, baby powder layering. It caused a short delay at a Miami postal facility. Another was flagged by German customs, also cleared, but suspicious in structure. It never led to charges, so he's not flagged as a criminal, but he is noted." Mark rubbed his forehead. "So, what does that mean for us right now?" "Nothing official," Harper said. "You're free to fly, but I suggest having a very honest conversation with Mr. Velasquez when you land." Elena felt a new wave of discomfort wash over her. "I didn't know any of this, I swear. He's just my cousin. He lives in Queens. We grew up together." "I believe you," Harper said. "But sometimes the people we know aren't exactly who we think they are." There was a long silence. Harper offered a business card. "If you remember anything else, anything at all about what he packed, said, or did, call this number, even if it feels irrelevant. Patterns matter." Elena took the card with a trembling hand. "We just wanted to go on vacation." "I know," Harper said gently, "and you still can. But keep your eyes open. Sometimes these things have a way of following people." With that, the agent turned and disappeared into the crowd, swallowed up by travelers and announcements and the distant ding of boarding calls. Mark and Elena stood there for a moment, stunned again. The relief from earlier had evaporated. Mark leaned in close. "She said we're free to fly, right?" "Yes. And we didn't do anything wrong." "No." "Then let's get on that plane and figure the rest out later." Elena nodded silently. They moved forward, handing over their boarding passes, which scanned with a cheerful beep. A flight attendant smiled. "Enjoy your trip." Mark forced a smile. "We'll try." As they walked down the jet bridge, Sophie stirred in Elena's arms and gave a small yawn. Mark glanced at the business card again before slipping it into his wallet, beside his ID. He didn't want to think about what could have happened, or what might still happen, but deep down, he couldn't shake the unease building in his gut, because while the package had been cleared, one thing was now crystal clear. Someone, somewhere, had used them, and they had no idea why. The cabin lights dimmed as the plane climbed steadily through layers of thick white clouds. Mark leaned back in his seat, watching the tiny dots of light fade beneath them. Elena sat beside him, cradling Sophie, who had finally drifted into sleep, wrapped in her soft pink blanket. The air was quiet, except for the steady hum of engines and the occasional clink of drink carts down the aisle. It should have felt like relief. Instead, Mark's mind wouldn't settle. He kept replaying the words from Agent Harper. "Sometimes the people we know aren't exactly who we think they are." The truth was, David had always been a bit odd, friendly, sure, loyal, yes, but flaky. The kind of guy who made promises and forgot them. Who borrowed money and never paid it back. He worked random jobs, warehouse shifts, car detailing, a little reselling online. But none of it ever stuck for long. And Mark had never questioned it. Not really. Family was family. But now, things looked different in hindsight. Elena whispered beside him. Can't sleep? Mark shook his head. Can you? Not really. She exhaled. I keep thinking, what if Harper hadn't caught us before we boarded? What if David did put something in there and just didn't tell us? She said it was baby formula. She thinks it was, Elena corrected. They ran a scan. But scans aren't perfect. What if he's done this before and just he didn't get caught yet? Mark sat back, the seat creaking under him. We'll call him when we land. Maybe there's an explanation. Elena raised an eyebrow. You think he'll tell us if there's more to this? I don't know. He rubbed his eyes, honestly. I don't know what to think anymore. Across the aisle, a flight attendant moved toward them. Sir, ma'am, we're about to begin meal service. Anything we can get for you, just water. Please, Elena said softly. Mark added, same. As the attendant moved on, Mark glanced at the overhead compartment. He double-checked the stroller and baby bag before boarding. No strange items. No more hidden bundles. Everything looked normal now. But normal had become a strange word. Even at 30,000 feet, they weren't truly leaving the situation behind. A soft chime sounded over the intercom. Ladies and gentlemen, this is your captain speaking. We're expecting some light turbulence over the Atlantic, so please keep your seat belts fastened when seated. Nothing to worry about, just a little bumpiness ahead. Mark muttered under his breath. Perfect. The cabin lights flickered once as the plane hit its first tremor. Sophie stirred slightly but didn't wake. Elena gripped the armrest, her knuckles white. She hated turbulence. I think we've had enough adrenaline for one day, she whispered. The plane dipped slightly again. Mark kept his hand on the armrest beside hers. A moment passed. Then his phone vibrated in his pocket. His eyes widened. How am I getting signal? Elena looked at him. What? He pulled out the phone. One notification blinked on the screen. One new email. The sender, David Velasquez. Mark unlocked the phone. Subject line. Don't tell anyone. His heart thudded once, then twice. He opened it. Inside, a single sentence. If anyone asks, you didn't know I packed the formula. Delete this. Mark stared at the words, stunned Elena. He said slowly, you need to read this. She took the phone, eyes scanning the message. Her expression twisted from confusion to horror. He knew it would raise questions. Mark grabbed the phone back, hovering over the delete button. His thumb paused. What do we do? Elena's voice was cold now. We don't delete anything. The plane jolted again, harder this time. A few passengers gasped. The captain's voice returned with calm urgency. Seatbelt signs are now on. But the real turbulence wasn't in the sky. It had just landed in Mark's inbox. Mark couldn't stop staring at the email, even as the turbulence settled and the cabin returned to calm. His pulse didn't. The message glowed on his screen like a warning flare. If anyone asks, you didn't know I packed the formula. Delete. This across the aisle. The flight attendants moved between rows again, but Mark barely noticed. His mind spun with implications. Elena leaned close. Do you think he knows we were stopped? Mark shook his head. How could he? We haven't told anyone. Unless her eyes narrowed. Unless he expected it. Mark locked his phone screen and slipped it back into his pocket, suddenly aware of how exposed it felt to even have it out. If he wrote that email before we boarded, he might have sent it assuming we'd get stopped, which means he knew it would be suspicious. Elena looked down at Sophie, sleeping peacefully, unaware her parents were unraveling something much bigger than they'd anticipated. I want to see everything, she said. Open your phone again. Maybe there's more. Mark hesitated, then unlocked it. He opened his email app and scrolled. There were other messages from David, some old, some routine. But one caught his eye. It was from tonight's before their trip. The subject was vague. Packing list. He opened it. It wasn't a list at all. It was a short message. I left you a sealed pouch in the white pack. Formula. For emergencies. Don't open it unless you need to. Mark felt his stomach turn. He wanted us to carry it without opening it. He knew how it would look. Elena covered her mouth. That's not just weird. That's deliberate. Mark sat back, voice low. We need to send this to Agent Harper. Elena nodded. Do it now. Before we land, Mark forwarded both emails to the address on the DHS card Harper had given them, adding only one line. These came from David. Thought you should see them. As soon as the message sent, he turned to Elena. Okay. At least now we're not holding anything back, yeah. But now what? Mark looked out the window. The Atlantic stretched endlessly beneath them, shimmering under scattered moonlight. Now we wait. About 30 minutes later, as the flight neared the European coast, Mark's phone buzzed again, surprising him. It was another email from Agent Harper. He opened it. Thank you for forwarding those messages. They support ongoing suspicions we've had. Please do not contact David upon landing. My team will be waiting at your destination to debrief you. You are not in trouble. We'll explain everything soon. Elena read it over his shoulder. They've had suspicions, so this wasn't just about us. No, Mark said quietly. We're part of something they've already been watching. The intercom crackled again. Ladies and gentlemen, we'll be descending shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten your seat belts. Mark powered off his phone and took a long breath. What if he's mixed up in something serious? Elena asked. I mean, really serious? Mark didn't answer. He didn't need to. They both knew the signs were pointing in that direction. By the time the plane landed and taxied to the gate, Mark and Elena could already see two men and a woman standing near the jet bridge doors. No uniforms, no badges, but the body language was unmistakable. One of them nodded at Mark as soon as they made eye contact. As the line of passengers slowly shuffled forward, Elena reached for his hand. Whatever this is, she whispered. We didn't ask for it. Mark squeezed her hand. But we're already in it. They stepped off the plane into the quiet hum of the arrivals hall and into the waiting hands of the people who knew far more than they had revealed. What had started as a simple flight with a baby stroller had turned into something darker. And the full truth had yet to come out. The arrivals hall was quiet, almost too quiet. The usual bustle of travelers collecting bags and rushing toward taxi lines seemed far away. Mark and Elena stepped off the jet bridge into a private corridor, one lined with neutral walls and soft lighting, clearly designed for discretion. The three agents waited at the end. One stepped forward, a tall woman with sharp eyes. It was Agent Harper. Mr. Bennett, Miss Torres. Thank you for coming with us. They followed her silently into a small security office tucked behind customs, where another agent waited. Harper gestured to two chairs, and they sat, Sophie still cradled in Elena's arms, shifting slightly in her sleep. Harper didn't waste time. I reviewed the emails you forwarded. What you may not know is that your cousin, David Velasquez, has been on a quiet watch list for several months. We suspect that he was being used as a link in a packaging network, moving items through families, friends, and travelers without their knowledge. He's not the head of anything, but he's more involved than he's ever admitted. Elena's face paled. Used for what? Smuggling, more like soft transport, Harper explained. He works with others who conceal money, unregistered devices, and sometimes prescription drugs inside everyday objects, baby items being a favorite. If the person carrying it doesn't know, they're harder to catch. Mark rubbed his forehead. So we were his cover. Harper nodded. That pouch may have tested as formula, but it was an engineered blend, mostly harmless, but unique enough to be valuable in underground labs. You were lucky our dog flagged it. It's likely you were being used as a test run. Elena looked stunned. A test run? He used our baby as a trial smuggle. Harper's tone softened. We know how wrong that sounds, and that's why we've already moved forward. Based on the messages you provided and other evidence we've compiled, we executed a warrant this morning in New York. David's home was searched. He's now in federal custody. Mark sat back, exhaling for the first time in what felt like hours. So it's over? Not entirely, Harper replied. You may be asked to testify if the case goes to court, but for now, you're in the clear. And more importantly, you helped, whether you meant to or not. Your cooperation gave us what we needed to act. Elena's voice trembled. He was family. I trusted him. Harper looked directly at her. That's why it worked. Trust is what people like this exploit. Mark stood slowly, nodding. We want no part of any of this. We just want to go enjoy our trip, hold our daughter, and forget this ever happened. Harper handed him a small packet. Here's a summary of the case status and your rights going forward. We've also arranged for a driver to take you to your hotel. Complimentary. On behalf of the agency, consider it a small thanks. As they exited the room and stepped into the cool air outside the airport, Elena held Sophie a little closer. The early morning sun was just beginning to rise over the city skyline, casting soft gold across the pavement. Mark opened the car door and turned to her. You okay? Elena nodded slowly. I will be, just still trying to process it all. Same, he said. But at least we're safe. and the people who needed to know the truth finally do. As the car pulled away, the weight of the last 24 hours began to lift, little by little. They hadn't asked to be part of an investigation. They hadn't set out to become unwitting couriers. But in the end, they made the right choices, even when it was hardest to do so, and, while the skies were behind them, the journey ahead quiet, honest, and unburdened was finally theirs again.